12:20 in the afternoon, and I'm interviewing my great uncle, Kenneth Measeck. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Glens Falls on 2nd Street, 81 years ago, in May 12th, 1924.
What education did you have before you entered the war?
Well, I graduated from, when I was young, my parents moved to Hudson Falls, and we lived on Coleman Avenue, and I grew up on Coleman Avenue for the most part. Went to Hudson Falls School, Hudson Falls High School, graduated in 1942, and during the war had started by then, okay? And probably in my junior years, I can remember, I had an opportunity to, and you'll see the relationship to this as we get into it. I had an opportunity to go to a defense school at, you know where the Margaret Murphy School is now?
Yeah.
There was a junior high school there.
Oh, really?
And one of the buildings was an industrial arts building. They had what they call a defense school in this industrial arts building for adults. And I was fortunate enough to get into the school as a junior, and primarily because of Mr. West. Who, you ever heard of him?
No.
No? Oh, come on. He was teacher. Okay. And my father. My father was the teacher of the night school and Saturday classes, along with a Mr. Haley. And they taught machine shop. Okay. And I got a significant number of hours during my junior and senior year, so that I became a little bit knowledgeable in what they did in the machine shop program. Okay, so I graduated in 1942, and left that defense school program and went to work in the union. There was a, you know where Sandy Hill Iron and Brass is, down on Allen Street? There was a machine shop in back of that called Union Bag Machine Shop, and I went to work there after high school. And I worked there for until I guess it was October. This was 1942. And one night prior to that, the war had been going on now for the most part of a year, not quite a year. And draft boards had been set up, and they formed a draft where they were drafting young people into the service. I had to register when I got out of high school. And they gave everyone a number. And it became apparent that I was going to be drafted. And a person that gets drafted doesn't have much choice as to what he's going to do. Okay, they go into the service, they go into the branch of service that I guess where the need is most. I came home one night, had a talk with my father, and he said, "You see what's coming, and you're a prime age, an 18-year-old." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I know what's coming." So, and he went on and said, "You know, if you enlisted, you'd have more of a choice as to what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go." And that made a lot of sense. So one day, that's what we did. We went to the draft board was up over McCann's drugstore, someplace in there. So we went down, we talked with them. Went to the draft board and talked with them. And okay, so some substance of it was that I enlisted in the service, and the thought was that I go into the service and try and get some sort of education out of it, a schooling or something. And when they learned that I had this machine shop background, that struck a bell, because they had all sorts of needs for those kinds of people. So on October 27th, 1942, an 18-year-old, I enlisted in the Air Corps, Air Force. Now, I don't know where you want to take it from there. You want any more background or what?
No, that's good. Let's see. So, is your family, they're all supportive of you going to the war?
Oh, sure.
Everywhere?
Yeah, yeah.
What was your job assignment while you were in the war?
What was my assignment in the war?
Was it mainly just working on the machine shop?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
It didn't change. You were in the States first, right? And then you went to India?
Right. The first thing they did, we go through basic training, then again, as I requested the schooling, again they sent me to a machine shop school in Kansas City, Missouri. And then from this machine, that was a 16-week program. Then from this machine shop program, I was sent to a base in Kansas, at Walker Army Airfield, Hayes, Kansas. And this base was unique in that it was, they were into an airplane, a B-29, that was new, that hadn't been used. The B-17 was an extensive aircraft that was used for bombing in Europe. And then they came up with this new airplane, bigger, a bombing plane, a B-29 plane. And again, I went there and worked in the machine shop. And it was just like work. You punch a clock, you're in the service, you punch a clock. And I stayed there. There was a shift work. You'd work days in some cases, and you work nights in some cases. And I stayed there for over a year. It got to the point where the people that were in Europe and in the South Pacific, where the war was raging on, had been there a significant length of time, and they wanted to rotate the people. The people that had been stateside, okay, now it's your turn to go to one of these theaters. So it became my turn to leave the States, and I went to India. And again, I worked in a machine shop. I worked there, I can tell you something about that. It was at Agra, and if that rings a bell, you know what also at Agra? No? Taj Mahal?
Oh.
Yeah. And that was just a short distance from the base, probably half a mile. We got to see that whenever we wanted, 3 or 4 times, in my case. Beautiful, beautiful building. Again, the work that I did was working in a machine shop with others, and I was there. We left for overseas out of California. First part of the year, I know I was on a troop train going across the United States for Christmas of '45. And we went out of Long Beach and spent 42 days on a troop ship going across the Pacific, down around Australia, and up into Calcutta. And I was there at Agra until the end, which was, let's see, April, so it would be back into probably the last part of February when we left to come home. And again, this time we didn't go down around Australia. We came a more direct route to the Philippines, and this time we came into Seattle. And we came into Seattle maybe the first part of April, a week or two in April of 1946. and everything happened quick thereafter. There was a troop train across the states to Fort Dix and discharged in April of 46, April 22nd, 46. I don't know, where do you want to take it from there?
While in India, did you ever come in contact with the enemy? Like, was your base ever attacked or anything? No?
The Japanese got into the Calcutta area, east of Calcutta. In fact, they penetrated all that coastline from Japan, Korea, Vietnam, all along through there, Singapore, and just into the eastern part of Japan, and that's as far as they got. The Americans and British were into the southern part of China along through there, into Burma, and they began to turn the tide. And their goal, Japanese goal, was to eventually infiltrate India, conquer India, to go along with that. If you can picture the southeast edge of Asia and that coastline where India would be the next in line after Vietnam and Korea and so on. They got the Japanese were into Burma. In Agra, India's a big country. Agra's in the central part of India, so it was well away from Calcutta and well away from what you term the enemy. The purpose of this base at Agra was to provide a link over the what they called the hump, the Himalayas, into China. The Japanese had China just about strangled, cutting along that coastline, and about the only way you could keep them involved in the war was to provide all sorts of goods, foods and gasoline particularly. And what we did at Agra was to, they had two airplanes, a C-47 and a C-46. And these airplanes, after they made so many trips over the Himalayas into China, the aircraft had to be serviced. They'd fly for maybe 1,500 hours, then they bring the airplane to Agra, and the engines were completely stripped off from there were two engine aircraft. Each engine was taken off, completely disassembled, and then remounted and sent back to fly over the hump again. And one of the big things, they were flying gas tanks. That's just about what they would say. And the people that were flying them, you know, that was a very dangerous thing to do. What was Agra like? It was right on the edge of a desert, Sin Desert. Hot, 110. I remember one time we had a barracks that we lived in, and there were 3 bays to the barracks, and probably in each bay there were maybe 8 cots on the side, maybe 16 in a bay. You slept under mosquito netting all the time. To go to a shower room and to go to a latrine, you had to go outside the barracks. And there were pieces of slate that you could walk on to go to each building. And I remember one time, to give you an idea how hot it got, one of the guys came along with an egg, cracked the egg and put it on that piece of slate, and it actually, he left it there a few minutes, and it actually turned white, cooked partially. It was hot, very hot.
When you were on the base, there's people coming from combat, flying the planes in to
What?
your base.
Pardon me, what about?
In India, did you have the planes from combat? They flew in, right?
Yes.
Did you notice the change in morale from the beginning of when you got there, and the soldiers towards the end? Like, no.
No.
Um,
When we left the base, everybody was beginning to clean out. And I often wondered what became of these buildings, and what became of this base. And I've done some research on the computer with it, and apparently it's still there. The Americans left it, and from the Indian Air Force using it for a training base. And a funny thing, to back up a ways to the one at Walker when I was in the United States. My wife and the two kids, after I'm jumping ahead on you.
That's okay.
After I got married and had a family, we took some trips, okay, out west, and we traveled to where we went by the Hayes, where this base was. And I got out there and began to wonder, geez, we should begin to see this, where this base is. This was a big base, all, where hundreds of people there, all sorts of amenities that go with it, hospitals and churches and mess hall and big maintenance buildings, runways, hangars, everything that would go with a village, you might say. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing that you could tell there was something there was there was a smokestack, a big smokestack, and the operations tower. That's the only thing that was left. They had cleaned everything out, knocked everything down, apparently taken it away. The runways were still there. We stopped at a gas station. I asked the guy, what happened to the air base? Oh, that's long been gone. You have these memories that a viable, ongoing thing. And the next time you saw it, it was completely void, completely gone. Just difficult, hard to comprehend and to understand. But apparently the government knocked it down. The guy said the only thing that they do there is the young people get out there on the strip with their drag racing and have a great time.
Have you ever wanted to go back to India?
Yes, and I never have. We came close maybe 10 years ago, my wife and I. And I guess we chickened out when we began to investigate it a little bit and found out that you're going to be on an airplane for such a long period of time that maybe it'd be too much for us. So I still would like to go back, but it's probably long gone now. Yeah. It's a very sad place to be. The poverty, even now, 50, 55 years ago, you can't imagine what life for the people with very limited or no means at all. You wonder how they survive. To go to the Taj Mahal from the base, you travel through the countryside, to some degree. It'd probably take half an hour or so to get there. And what we saw were people living in mud huts. Brahma cows, now, I don't know if you know what a Brahma cow is, one with a big hump on the back. They roamed freely and literally all over. You go into the community of Agra, and they're walking all over the streets. Just no restraints, there's nothing to confine them, and it's still like that. Although I've read recently where they're going to begin to impose a fine on anybody that allows their cattle to do that. Whether it's come to pass or not, I don't know. But at that time when we were there, that's what was happening. The traditional garb was and you see this sometimes, you're visiting the mall or something, you see people from India with their sari on, and which is a big piece of material. Very colorful, very pretty, but in some cases very drab. People that have limited means, I suppose, where they, over their head, around their body, down to their ankles. I suppose it being so hot there, that something very loose and flowing, it's a little bit cooler for them. Now don't misunderstand me, it's not all like this. But again, in the countryside, where you see these poor people, you'd see them crouched by a mud hut, a small burning fire outside the mud hut, with a grate, and cooking, basically, which was a pound mesh of corn that they made into a pancake type of thing called a chapati. You'd often see people walking nearby out in the countryside with a basket. You wonder, what the heck are they doing? And they're out there following the cows and the cattle and looking for dung. Picking up dung and putting it in the basket, taking it home to the mud hut, slapping it on the side of on the building to dry. And when it's dry, this is what they use for fuel, for cooking. Imagine cooking with this. It's hard to visualize. I feel so sorry for those people that grew up, those young children that have grown up and can't break out of this cycle. You go into the streets and beggars, bakshi, and their hand out, you know, they want you to give them some money. After we'd been there a number of months, we got to go to a rest camp. In my case, it was up in Kashmir, which is in the northern part of India, up near Nepal. And that was beautiful up in there, up into the mountains, to get out of the desert, get into the cool weather. You could see the snow out in the distance on the mountaintops. And this is in the fall. And here we went into a British community of Renacant, and a completely different atmosphere than what I just described. You know, the British were predominant. You could see that it was altogether a different life. And you have these two drastic extremes of life in India. And it kind of makes you say how lucky you are, fortunate you are, to have had the experiences that we've had in a lifetime, to live in this country. I don't know if you as 18-year-olds can really appreciate where you live, what your families have provided for you. But see some of these conditions and how people live in these deprived countries, it makes you, I guess, proud to live in the United States and proud to be an American. Well, maybe that's off the subject. What do you think?
How, or what other ways did the military influence your life and affect it?
How this affected my life
Yeah.
afterwards? When along in the 40s, when there was evident the war was going to end, Congress passed a bill called the GI Bill of Rights, where they came up with a program that a person that wanted to go to college, they would provide the opportunity for him to do so. And boy, that sounded real great for me, because there was no opportunity beforehand to even know when I got back home that I was going to be able to go to school. So Mr. West was, as I say, kind of idolized what he did in school. There's an industrial arts teacher there at Hudson Falls. And I guess if I had a choice, that's something that I would have liked to do, become an industrial arts teacher. Oswego, SUNY Oswego, was a good had a good industrial arts program in New York State. And there was a man that I learned, Dr. Thomas Miller. There was a dean who was in charge of admittance and this sort of thing. I wrote, when I was still in India, I wrote to him and asked if it would be possible to consider me becoming a freshman. And he wrote back and said yes. And when I got back in April, I received word from him saying that they had started an accelerated program starting in June of '46. Where you can complete a 4-year program in 3 years by going 3 summers. And he wanted to know if I'd be interested. So that sounded good, because I came home and like everybody else, I didn't have a job. Although I could have gone back to this machine shop at the Union Bag, but I decided not to and take advantage of this offer from Oswego. Okay, so I got my bachelor's degree in '49. I went to work as an industrial arts teacher, and I spent 4 years in a small school system between north of Norwich. I don't know if you know, that's maybe south of Utica by 50 miles. We spent 4 years there and got an offer from Glens Falls of an opening in industrial arts in a machine shop program. So we're back to that again. Okay, so I spent 11 years at the junior high in a machine shop program. And you see how it kind of all ties together. Machine shop keeps coming back. Then there were 4 years after that I was an administrative assistant at high school in Glens Falls. And then after that I finished up with 11 years with BOCES on Dix Avenue as a guidance coordinator. Where do you want to go now?
Did you receive any awards or medals?
Pardon me?
Did you receive any awards or medals?
They had a victory medal and a good conduct medal, yeah.
Okay. How do you feel towards the enemy today?
How did what?
How do you feel towards the enemy today? Has it
The
changed?
Army?
The enemy?
The Army.
The enemy, like Japanese?
Oh, the enemy?
Yeah. Do you feel any differently towards them?
No. I don't know how the feelings are, really. I guess they've changed a great deal. The communications, government, politically, has changed a great deal in diplomatic relationships. And, after the war ended, and that's something that this B-29 program that Hayes became involved with, is grooming aircraft to go into the Pacific and bomb the Japanese industries. And in fact, the two bombs that were dropped at Hiroshima and Nagasaki were dropped from a B-29. Completely devastated those two cities. Thousands and thousands of people, 60, 70,000 people in each case. And they just leveled the cities. And then General MacArthur moved in with a task force that set up a whole new government for the Japanese, although they didn't remove the imperial control. Well, to some degree, though, he did, but they still let him reign. They had trials where the Hito was tried and convicted, but MacArthur gradually began to let the Japanese take control of running their own governments. And that, I think there was more democracy involved as a result of this, instead of the imperial direct control. Although there is still that feeling there with the Japanese government, and they still recognize an emperor, an empress. The feelings have changed, and I think as a direct result of what MacArthur generated through this democratic approach. But I have no ill feelings towards Japanese people. It's just very, very sad that this Pearl Harbor thing had to occur. But again, I've got a book, and I'll let you, that I put together, that I'll let you look at. It's a small, as you know, it's a small island country, and they had to somehow break out and find other natural resources and other places for their people to expand to, and that was some of the reason for the Japanese approach to Southeast Asia, trying to gain land, try to gain ports, try to gain natural resources that China had. I lost my point, I was going to say. Well, maybe I'll think of it. Go on.
How do you feel about the war today in Iraq?
Where's Iraq? Well, it's sad too. People somehow they need to get along. It's just too bad that these people are Americans are over there in other countries too, send representatives there. There are young people that are involved. I guess I'm more of a pacifist. A H-E-L-L. There's no other way to say it. You gotta live it to realize, to get the feeling. You know, you're talking about killing or be killed. And, you know, that, you take an 18-year-old and completely turn around his life. It's just sad, sad, sad. But the butt side of it is, there have been wars since the beginning of Julius Caesar and the Romans and all the way down the line. And although people say that, you know, this war will end all wars, it ain't gonna happen. Which is just, it's terrible. How I feel about the Iraqi people, and just, I guess, how I feel about the Japanese people or the German people. The German people were led, and again, I'd like to look at this book, and you can see how this thing in Germany and Europe escalated, and it just didn't happen when the United States got involved in the war after Pearl Harbor. It backs way up after World War I. And the bind that repatriations had on Germany, and the effect that this vast army that they had going back into Germany, and what effect it had on their economics, the economic conditions that followed in Germany. I have no bad feelings about German people either. It's just bad that things have to be settled this way, through war. It can't be settled through discussion like through the United Nations.
Would you encourage any of your children or grandchildren to fight for the country?
I'd hate to see them become involved in something like this. I have a grandson that's 26, I guess. I wouldn't like to see him become involved. I had a son. That was at a prime age when he got out of high school in the late 60s. And if you can remember and date things back then, that was Vietnam era. And this is the era where there was a lot of dissension and demonstrations in the streets, and particularly in colleges. And he wound up at Kent State, and I don't know if that rings a bell with you or not, but that demonstration that occurred at Kent State, he was there. He said when they started shooting, he fell on the ground to get out, to get out of the way. I'm so fortunate that he was in school and didn't get drafted. I would not have liked him to become involved in that kind of a war either, because that was jungle warfare, I guess. And very, very, very hectic, very, very bad.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
Other than to go back and say, and I reflected on it a little bit, of how fortunate we all are to live here in the United States, and to have this way of life. Those people in Vietnam, Korea, even in parts of China, the deprived conditions that exist there. you as 18-year-olds, put yourself in a place where next month or the next month after that, you had to pull everything out and become involved in a war. Leave home, go someplace and start killing people. That's not the way to live. We're fortunate that, well, other than the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, wars have never touched the United States. They've always been someplace else. I just wish they'd end. People could resolve their ways politically and diplomatically. I guess those are my feelings.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Let me get that. This is a lot of it. I don't know how much time you want. I tried to do two things here.
Is it something you wrote?
Yeah. I've tried to tell something about World War II and something about how I fit into World War II. And I started back how it all got started, World War II got started. And tried to chronologically list events that happened. And when I came on the scene, it was in '42. And these are some recent things that I've got out of the papers that I have since opened the book up and inserted them at the appropriate. This is Anne Frank. You know about her?
Yeah.
I mean, that just so sad. That girl to have been locked up for a couple of years, and then finally they killed her. She was 41. We're getting close to Pearl Harbor, I guess. Japanese. Here's the memorial.
Have you ever gone to Pearl Harbor?
No, we went by it, but never got off the ship. But you want to take this?
Yeah, sure.
There's places here that where I was in Agra, the kinds of things that happened.
Are these your pictures that you took?
No.
No.
The kinds of things that they did, kinds of things that happened there. Oh, all right, there's this is the Fort Beef. This is the C-46. They fill it up with supplies and go over the.
Those are the ones that you worked on?
Yep. And this is the other one, C-47. But if that'll help you any, what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
But don't lose it.
I won't.
I want it back. I want it back.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I hope it's what you're looking for.
That was